And welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network, coming to you from the Finger Lakes of New York. I am Brian Griffiths. Joining us from the Jim Plunkett studio, Greg Klein.
Good to be here. And by the way,
yes, I love technology.
Yeah. Buckle
Brian
in, folks. It's
from the bird sanctuary there. Dropped out 30 seconds before we went on air. That's why we do it live, John, Tim. This is the excitement. And you've only got a couple more to go. So our next
more.
This is the penultimate show.
Yes, Jimmy Brown made it a point to remind me of that today. The penultimate show, not to be confused with the Pennsylvania show. That's a different thing. Greg, why don't we do a sponsor?
We're going to miss this level of comedy. I mean, my God, where will you get this level of comedy in the future?
We do have a sponsor tonight, Greg. Why don't you go ahead and run that beautiful bean footage?
We're going to get there. Just relax.
That's what she said.
Tonight's show is sponsored by Rob Seyfried for Congress. Here's Mr. Seyfried.
My name is Rob Seyfried, and I am running for the Republican nomination with Congress, seeking to represent the 3rd Congressional District here in Maryland. I'm running as a Republican because I believe in the Republican Party platform, but my goal is to be your man in Washington. I want to be there to serve your interests, not DC insiders. My goal is to empower you to take charge of your own lives and make your own destiny, not to empower the bigger government. My name is Rob Seyfried, and I approve this message.
Thank you, Rob, for
My name is Rob Seyfried.
Sponsoring tonight's show. You only paid for 3. Run the other one later. We do have a lot to talk about here tonight.
The election is June 2nd, by the way.
The election is June 2nd.
The ballots are out there. Yours must be postmarked or handed in by June 2nd. Isn't that correct? That's correct.
It is correct. Has to be postmarked by 8 p.m. next Tuesday, June 2nd, received within 10 days after the election, or deposited in one of those nifty boxes, collection boxes all around the county, all around your county, wherever you are, by June 2nd. Correct. And Greg, have you submitted your ballot yet?
I have not. I will submit it. I will take it. My plan is to fill it out, to sign it, which you must do. Please make sure you have a signature on it. And then my plan is to take it to the Severna Park Library collection thing.
Collection thing. That's a technical term.
It's a box. I don't know. What do you call it? Collection. It's not really
collection box. Yes.
It's just a box. Yeah. What's in the box, dude? Votes. That's it.
In the box,
in there.
What's in the box is your name, but not mine.
Vote.
There you go. So we're also going to talk about Calvin Ball, obviously, and but we're also, of course, going to talk about the pandemic.
We stated in the show that we stated in the show notes and the promotional for this that we were going to talk about. So we will be talking about it.
Yeah,
it would only be obvious to you if you had looked at our post and saw what we were going to talk about.
And honestly, why would you not have not looked at our post and see what we're talking about? This is going to be one of those shows, isn't it? Because both of us are completely off.
This is already off of the rails completely. Completely. And like I said, Brian dropped out right beforehand, so I have no idea what the technology is doing. He's got a totally different setup in some sort of bird sanctuary in the Finger Lakes. Where are the Finger Lakes of New York? I'm not from New York.
It's literally the Finger Lakes region. That is literally descriptive. That is the region. It's the Finger Lakes region.
What is that? Is that
Buffalo? There are lakes.
Is that Albany?
We're about 75 miles east of Buffalo.
I'm not from New York.
You have
how many miles?
New York State. 75 American miles from New York.
I'm not saying I haven't been to New York State. I'm saying that I don't recall ever going to the Finger Lakes of New York. It's a large state. It's a rather large state, actually. People forget.
It is the second largest state, I believe, east of the Mississippi. Behind, what's the largest state east of the Mississippi, Greg?
I haven't. Illinois.
Georgia.
Okay.
Did you know that?
No, obviously I didn't know that because you just asked me and I got the wrong answer.
That's true.
I've been to Georgia. I've been to.
Just going to let a pitch go by there.
Show.
Anyway, let's talk about the pandemic.
Let's do that.
So
we're getting governor. Yeah.
The governor.
Next to last show. This delay is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, it really is. I don't know what's going on with that.
Great. Ryan, why don't you set it up?
So the governor yesterday obviously had a press conference where more restrictions were removed. The biggest restriction that was removed was the ability to dine out. You will now have the ability to dine out at a restaurant outside with appropriate social distancing. Right. I don't know why anybody would want to do that given all of these other factors and circumstances, but I know a lot of people are all ginned up for that. Also, the governor is allowing summer camps to open, and the governor is also allowing pools to open up to 25% capacity with additional restrictions. I have no idea why anybody would want to swim in a public pool while there's a pandemic going on, but whatever.
Fair question.
Of course, all of this kind of now has to go to the county level because the counties still have restrictions in place, particularly our county, Anne Arundel County, and
the governor, as he's done before, has allowed the localities to have to make their own restrictions within that as well, to approve, to sign off, to make changes. And he did that before with the phase 1 opening. He's done that now with the end of phase 1 opening. We're just making stuff up. So yes, you're correct. So county by county, these things are still different. So go ahead. I interrupted you. I was just...
I was going to say, like you said, in Anne Arundel County, Stuart Pittman has literally no idea what the hell he's doing. Which, to be honest, is most of the time, because he is still waiting to determine if we can go to phase 1. Because in the last week, Pittman has said we're going to phase 1 June 1st, and then he said, "Well, now 17 hours later, he said, well, we can't go to phase 1 quite yet. The numbers don't add up." Then yesterday is like, well, we're still deciding whether we can go to phase 1 or not. And Pittman is one of many who are just pissing in the wind when it comes to decision making. I think that for the most part, Pittman's issue, of course, the fact that the guy is a wealthy horseman. He has no concept of bureaucracy. He has no concept of being an organizational leader. He's not somebody who has led people. He is not somebody who has led a business. He is not somebody who has met payroll either in the public or private sector. And he's just fledgling along and like he's lost, like a lost puppy looking for a stick. And the problem is, of course, this creates mass confusion. First off, it is creating mass confusion that counties are kind of doing their own thing, each individual thing. We'll talk about Calvin Ball in a few minutes. But Pittman in particular has made no effort to definitively announce when phase 1 is going to start so things could open up even in a limited manner.
I agree with you that it does add to the confusion when the governor announces something and then the localities are doing something different. I think the governor put that in there, as he explained in his press conference the other day. We talked about last week, it was probably a smart political move. Because what a lot of these Democratic county executives wanted to do is have it all on Hogan to make the tough decisions, and then they could just snipe about it. What he did was he said, I'm willing to open it up. If you want to join me, it's on you. If you don't want to join me, that's on you too. So I think that was smart. But as the governor pointed out yesterday, seems like a year ago, it was yesterday, in his press conference, some of these guys, and I think Stuart Pittman is definitely one, are just kind of freelancing it. They want to just have their own opening plan rather than simply deciding what parts of the governor's reopening they want to be a part of. And Stuart Pittman's a great example where he's looking at other statistics and he's looking at other things. And Mark Elrich in Montgomery County is looking at total cases or something, which is insane. I think it does add to confusion. It adds a lot more of the political element to this. I think to some extent it makes sense in places like Prince George's County, where you have much higher cases and rates
Montgomery County too. I mean, Montgomery County and Prince George's County are the hot spots, at least as far as Maryland goes.
I think it also allows the governor to do two things. It allows the governor to move faster to reopening. He basically showed his hand and said, look, next week we're going to phase 2 unless something really, really bad happens. I would expect next week that we go to phase 2. He can move faster, and instead of doing a regional thing, he's letting those he knows that Western Maryland, the Eastern Shore, parts of Southern Maryland are going to want to go faster. They're going to want to go as fast as the governor will let them. Hartford County, places like that. So he knows they're going to do it, and if other places don't want to do it, it's on them. So I know it adds a confusion. What's frustrating is that these localities, and especially Anne Arundel County and Baltimore County, which, as the governor pointed out, their infection rates are dropping or below the state average. Their statistics in all those locations are going down too. There's no reason for them to be slowing down. There's no, especially here in Anne Arundel County, there's really no objective measure that we should be going slower than the state is. You can make that argument in Prince George's or Montgomery, but not here in Anne Arundel. And then to just do kind of slapdash, and we'll get to Howard County here in a second, to kind of slapdash and just rewrite the whole thing from the beginning gets you in all kinds of trouble, is really dumb. And it's just these Democratic county executives trying to just assert their own authority. And at some point, I understand why the governor's doing what he's doing. It's probably smart politically, practically, it makes some sense. But at some point, he's just going to have to say, look, it's done. I'm not going to let you guys dick around with this forever. Either you're going to come along to where we are now, or I'm just going to rescind the orders, and then you don't have any legal authority to do this stuff. So we'll see. And I
mean, politically, that's going to be problematic for the governor because he did punt the decision to them in the first place. So politically, it will be a problem.
But if he's at phase 2 or phase 3, and you got somebody dicking around with some part of it, Stuart Pittman doesn't want to open parks. Okay. I think the governor can just go and say, look, everybody's at stage 1 now. I let you tinker with it for a while, but now we're all moving on to stage 2. You can decide how fast from there. I don't know that he's going to do that. I agree with you, Brian. But I think some of the hint from the press conference yesterday was he wasn't real happy with some of the dickering that was going on. And if he gets to a certain, if we start getting too much of a disparity, then I think there is going to be some closing on that. And I think he did that in part, the kind of these other counties to at least get into phase 1 reopening. And I think we saw something from Montgomery County, I think, subsequent to the governor's announcement. So, and I think his addition of this new statistic, which is based on the additional testing that we're able to do of this infection rate, which, look, I'm all in favor of reopening. You know that.
Of course.
We'll talk a little later about the Gonzales Poll. Let's move. Whatever you got to do to justify reopening, do it. But the fact is, if you start testing more people, if we were only testing people who were symptomatic and exposed to people with COVID, we're going to have higher infection rates than when we start doing just general anybody who wants to come in and get a test, whether they're symptomatic or not, whether they've been exposed or not. Of course, it's going to be lower. So I don't know how much that statistic actually means anything. It's probably more true of what the actual infection rate is within the population as a whole, and the other one probably wasn't worth a whole lot either. But I'm saying, you're just playing with numbers at that point, which is why the deaths and the hospitalizations and the ICU things, it's kind of that old thing from The Wire. You can't hide the bodies. You can game the stats, but you can't hide the bodies. So,
let me say this about that, because obviously, coming up this way, I've been able to experience stores that are open. Places that are open in Pennsylvania, in New York, okay? And there, people, for the most part, are doing their best to stay mindful, keep their distance from people. They're wearing their masks. Generally speaking, they are wearing masks even when they're outside, like they're in a parking lot or something like that. People aren't being dicks, is the point that I'm getting to with all of this. And this is where some of our friends who are raising holy hell about masks becomes part of the problem. Okay, and I know I'm gonna wrist slap some of our friends here, because a lot of people are making this political statement about not wearing a mask. And I got to tell you, if everybody wears a mask, things are going to be better. Not just from the perspective of you're less likely to get somebody ill. If somebody else wears a mask, they're less likely to get you ill. But also, if you're not going to wear a mask, that gives everybody the heebie-jeebies about reopening again. Okay? So wear your GD mask and things are going to be okay. There are tons of things to protest with legitimacy. Being asked to wear a mask is not one of them.
Yeah, well, we've covered that.
I know. My point being is the fact in these places, it's getting done and people are doing it, and it's not a problem.
Yeah, I think there are more people writing about it on Facebook than are actually not wearing a mask in public. At least that's been my experience. Sounds like it's been your experience too. So I don't think we need to beat that horse. Now, let's talk about one of these counties you wrote about today. Howard County introduced some new guidelines and specifically targeted places of worship. Let me have you set up what happened, because you got a piece at Red Maryland today about that.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, Calvin Ball, the Democratic Howard County executive, put forth his restrictions that were, or his reopening plan, which includes restrictions, obviously. And I believe that goes into effect tomorrow. And the restriction that got everybody, including my, attention, was the ban on the consumption of food or drink during religious ceremony. Now, obviously, I'm a Catholic. Greg's Lutheran. We both do this in some form or fashion. Greg's, I believe it's bread and wine. For us, it's the body and blood of Christ. But
now don't let. I mean, if you want to litigate that, we can litigate it, but don't speak out of ignorance, because you're wrong about that.
I'm not going to litigate against the litigator.
Good. We consume the body and blood of Christ too. Jesus said, "This is my body, this is my blood." That's what he said. That's what it is.
Anyway,
we don't try to explain it through some physical process. We just accept Jesus at his word and leave it at that. Well, but it is a physical presence.
Anyway, transubstantiation is real. The point being, my piece at Red Maryland speaks obviously of my Catholic experience. Greg, I can give you a moment here in a second to explain the Lutheran experience. But you can't have a mass, period, without somebody eating something. Okay, that's part of the Eucharistic celebration, is that the priest consecrates the bread into the body of Christ, consecrates the wine, it becomes the blood of Christ, and the priest eats it and drinks it. You can't have a mass without those two things happening, without the priest consuming those. You can have a mass without the public distribution of communion. That's fine. That has been done previously. That's been done recently. My church, as I wrote about on my piece at redmaryland.com, our church has been doing live streams and only the priest has been consuming. But it literally, if the priest doesn't consume the body and blood of Christ, you cannot have a mass. Greg, how does that work with your experience, as a Lutheran and in your Lutheran services?
Well, let me say a couple of things before we get into the details. The point is, the main problem here is that this regulation was not some general regulation of things in the county. This was a specific regulation of the exercise of one's religion. And specifically, the county was outlawing the distribution of the Lord's Supper. That was clearly what was contemplated here. Okay. When they targeted, and even though it applied generally to every religious observance, that it was still targeted at religious observances.
Correct.
So this was a regulation of the free exercise of religion. This was not. Let me finish my point. Because I think this is more important than getting the nitty gritty of how this denomination or that denomination does it. I'll explain all that. That's fine. But the point is, you can go to any drive-in in Howard County, and someone can hand you food and can hand you drink, and you can consume it. That's always been legal. Okay. This made it illegal. And when we had restrictions, it said no place can have more than 10 people in it at all, whether you're a Moose Lodge or the church, same thing applies. That's a different kind of regulation, though it may impinge upon the free exercise. That's a different argument.
Right.
This was a specific regulation that criminalized, because there were criminal penalties attached to it, the distribution of food and drink during religious services, which clearly was targeted at the celebration of the Lord's Supper. Okay. That's why this was so insidious and so disgusting and so wrong, because Calvin Ball, who I know listens to the show, said very nice things about us on the Elevate podcast. He enacted regulations that were targeted, that made a policy decision on how people exercise their religion in Howard County. Okay. That was horrible. It was wrong. It is the clearest violation. And it was put forward by people who have predominantly secular progressives who view religion as something other than sincere form of expression that needs to be protected.
Constitutionally protected expression.
Well, it is constitutionally protected. Obviously, they weren't worried about that. But this is something very different than some general regulation for health and safety. This was
to that point, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong.
Let me finish my point, because I'm not done yet.
Sorry.
So that's what made it insidious. Now, I had people who tried to say, well, it's applied to all religions equally, and different denominations, as Brian points out, handle it differently. You can have, this is true in the Lutheran Church, Protestant Church, we can have a religious service without celebrating the sacrament of Holy Communion. Okay. Either the pastor or the congregants or whomever, we can do that. We've had a debate within our congregation and whether we can have communion even while we're broadcasting. I don't think you can. My pastor would disagree. Let's not get into that. The point is how we deal with the distribution of the elements, the consecrated elements of the Eucharist, is inherently a religious expression, which is guaranteed to be sacrosanct by the state and federal constitutions. It's not something that county apparatchiks, some county health commissar, should ever even begin to think about forming regulations about under any circumstances at any point in time. This is what's so horrible about this. So yeah, we could have a service and not do this. We could do other things. We could bless the elements and have cups rather than a common cup. We can do all that, and we can decide that individually. But the point is, nobody in the Howard County Department of Health should be telling my church or your church or any other church how they conduct their religious services, period.
Correct.
Full stop. And that's what this was. And I understand they walked it back, and I understand it was some input from the faith community, particularly the Catholic folks who led the charge on this, which is great. But this was so insidious. And I pointed this out on Twitter, and then I'll give it back to you. One of the most insidious things about this entire pandemic response is how government has felt obliged and empowered to regulate the free expression of religion in clear violation of our constitutional rights. And while there is some legal precedent for that kind of intrusion under general provisions, under extreme circumstances, this went far beyond that, so far over the line, so far beyond the pale. And it is part of a secular progressive movement there was an article in the New York Times months ago we talked about that blamed, churches were a big reason why these diseases spread. But it is being pushed by people, and I'm not accusing Calvin Ball. I don't know what his religious affiliation is, but I know the secular progressive movement that he's a central part of view religion negatively. They're not faithful Christians, certainly, who understand the importance of and the value of that sacrament, and understand that whatever disease it might carry, what's in that cup and what's in that bread is more important than any disease it might carry with it. And to deny it to anyone under any circumstances for any reason is a clear violation of one of our most fundamental, basic constitutional and human rights.
There's a lot to unpack there. I think first and foremost, you're absolutely right, particularly about the insidious part, specifically the fact that targeted church services above and beyond, as you point out, McDonald's or a food service and something like that. Now, obviously, not all religions are affected by this. If just going to use him as an example, he's not going to preach in Howard County. If Joel Osteen were there, they're not distributing food and drink. Okay, that's a whole different ball of wax. Many religions, many churches and religious services are just not, distributing the bread and body of Christ or whatever, whatever their faith tradition allows. What's just as insidious, Greg, you talked about how he walked it back. He didn't walk it back. If you read what I quoted, his spokesman said, okay? They didn't walk it back because they realized, you know what? We just went a step too far. We realized this was unconstitutional. We realized this was immoral. No, they walked it back in light of Governor Hogan's, this is their reasoning, that Governor Hogan's removal of restrictions on outdoor dining. Like that's got some relation, something to do with the distribution of food and drink during a religious service. They didn't even have the guts to admit they screwed up, and instead tried to deflect and say, well, we got this new regulation from the Hogan administration. We investigated it, and we're still looking at all the new food distribution regulations. It's just a bullshit answer to a problem they should have never created in the first place. And my piece at redmaryland.com points this out. Ball, in his executive order, and the people who surround him, it's just another one of these this misfit intersectionality things where they believe, as you point out, that religion is not truth, that nobody should be entitled to their religious beliefs if they disagree with the progressive world order, and that religion is subservient to the progressive will. The progressive will in this instance was that Catholics, Lutherans, people of that ilk should be denied the freedom of religion. And that's a problem. It's a problem that's not going to go away overnight. We saw this issue 8 years ago with the gay marriage debate in this state, where people of faith were criticized for believing what the Bible says and believing the word of the Lord when it comes to marriage, to relations between a man and a woman. So we're not surprised by it, but it's just the most glaring example of government overreach into the freedom of religion during a time of crisis. This is right from the Obama Never Let a Crisis Go to Waste playbook, and it shows the ignorance that many people on the left have about the faith community and about issues of religion. It would have never occurred to somebody, I think even as recently as 20 years ago, back when there were Democrats who pretended that they were regular churchgoers, to do something like this. And this is the idea. Yeah, we're way past the Rubicon on that.
I think the idea of having an express regulation that outlawed communion is something that would have been just unthinkable. It should be unthinkable now.
It was unthinkable when it happened.
It could have, but nobody would have even thought of that, as you say, 20, 30 years ago. No one would have said, hey, we've got this disease going around. Let's pass a specific regulation that says churches can't have communion. Because that's essentially what it said. They put it in terms of, and as they walk it back, they're not going to admit they made a mistake or that they did something overreaching. They're going to try to, do a two-step and put it in the context of general food distribution regulations, because legally that's what they should have done if it was going to be justifiable, and they didn't. Because I read what they put out, and it specifically dealt with places of worship, and it specifically dealt with using it as part of the worship. You just cannot have public officials expressly regulating the exercise of religion, full stop.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and take a break? When we come back, we'll talk about the Gonzales Poll. And then later on tonight, we will also preview the Tuesday's, well, I guess you could call it Tuesday's primary election, but the conclusion of the primary election. Stick with us. You are listening to Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network.
My name is Rob Seifert, and I am running for the Republican nomination with Congress, seeking to represent the 3rd Congressional District here in Maryland. I'm running as a Republican because I believe in the Republican Party platform, but my goal is to be your man in Washington. I want to be there to serve your interests, not DC insiders. My goal is to empower you to take charge of your own lives and make your own destiny, not to empower the bigger government. My name is Rob Seifert, and I approve this message.
I've been thinking, and I feel like I could be a real asset to you guys. I want to help.
What? Wait. So first you wash your hands in politics. Now you want back in. Let's go flip-flopping, Mac. That's what Democrats do.
Hang on a second.
Hi, this is Brian Griffiths, the founder of Maryland Podcast Month. Maryland Podcast Month was founded in 2018 to draw attention to all of the great podcasts and podcasters here in Maryland. And during this time of social distancing, there is no better time to start learning more about locally produced podcasts. Shows like my podcast, Red Maryland Radio, Eye on Annapolis, the Conduit Street Podcast, JB's Drive-In Podcast, the Maryland Crabs, Quality Time, the Society Fringe Players, and more are still putting out fresh content. Visit MarylandPodcastMonth.com to learn more about these great Maryland podcasts. That's MarylandPodcastMonth.com. And we thank you for your support of local content.
Wherever you are, whatever you do, have a nice day. Sky Radio.
Check it out, Joe.
We are back. Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network. I am Brian. He is Greg.
Good to be here. Good to be here. So good. Our penultimate show. We only have one more show after this.
Indeed.
So
penultimate.
That's right. That's right.
Why is that funny?
It's not funny. It's this. This is not an ideal show. This is not. I'm glad we're not going out this one.
Now we're going out next week after the primary election. But before we get to the primary election, let's talk about the Gonzales Poll, Greg. Another Gonzales Poll came out. I guess people are easy to reach right now. They're within reach of their phone or their phone, either their phone line or their cell phone. Right. So the big number, Greg, Governor Hogan gets a 78% approval rating, one of the highest in the country. 78% approve, 18% disapprove. 82% approve of the governor's job performance, only 13 disapprove. 71% Republican, 25% disapprove. I challenge you to find any other governor in the country where a governor of one party has a higher approval rating from the other party. 25% of Republicans disapprove. 74% of
it's entirely good, but it is an odd statistic to be sure.
Yeah, it is a very odd statistic. 74% unaffiliated approve, 20% disapprove, 80% of women, 15% disapprove, 76% of men approve, 20% disapprove. Greg, none of that surprises you, right?
Well, I think I talked about this morning on WGMD. I mean, if you look behind the methodology and some of the results here, it's a little bit misleading. First off, the polling was done last week, which was after the governor had announced for 2 weeks in a row, openings of the economy and moving toward opening. So, if this poll had been taken a month ago, results might have been different. The approval rating is misleading. I mean, the governor came out yesterday and said, 5 to 10% say I'm going too fast, 5 to 10% say I'm going too slow. First off, that's not what the Gonzales Poll says. The numbers are bigger than that. If you look at the question that was asked, have the restrictions gone too far? Okay, 90% of Democrats say they're either just right or haven't gone far enough, but a majority of Republicans said they went too far. Like 54% of Republicans statewide said it's gone too far. And that matches up with what we're hearing, with what we're seeing from Republican elected officials who are almost still unanimous in pushing the governor in letters and advocating different particular policies for him to go further, faster in opening this thing up. So, it's interesting that a majority of Republicans in this poll said that they thought the governor went too far in shutting things down and yet still give him high approval numbers. Now, part of that, I think, is just partisan loyalty, frankly. But I think if the folks in the second floor, which, by the way, looking at how fast they're moving to open it up, I think they understand what's really going on. I don't think they think that the governor has, 80% approval. Okay, which is kind of what the governor was saying at his press conference yesterday. He's been a popular governor throughout, and I think, look, most people have been supportive of what's going on, but Republicans particularly have been wanting to open things up much, much faster, and particularly within the small business community, which is a critical part of that Hogan coalition that we talk about. So, again, I mean, if the folks in the political shop in the second floor think are doing a victory lap around this poll, which I'm sure some of them are doing, just they ought to be thankful it wasn't done 2 weeks earlier. And they got real big problems within the Republican part of their own base if they care about it. As you point out, Democrats think the governor's doing a much better job than Republicans do, which for Governor Hogan may be just fine. But if I were running to succeed him as a Republican, let's say, I might want to kind of work on that a little bit. Just saying.
Well, I think that any Republican who may be working in the administration and is and would seek to succeed the governor, there is plenty of daylight that one could put in place between themselves and the governor. Particularly if, say, the lieutenant governor were running for governor, and he can say, nope, this isn't how I would have done it. The governor did work this on his own. I was helping do my part to run the rest of the state. But I would have done it a different way.
First off, I don't think he said anything like that, and I don't think he would say anything like that, and I don't think people would find it credible.
Right now, no. It's not the right time to do that. Why would the lieutenant governor come out right now and say, Gov, you're not doing it right, at least publicly? There's no benefit to that. Nobody wins from that.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but the point is, if you wanted to do it credibly, now would be the time to do it. If he does it 2 years from now as a ploy to get the Republican nomination, it's not going to work. And I don't think he's going to do it. Look, I think Lieutenant Governor Rutherford is a good soldier and he's a loyal guy. And I think the governor does still have broad popularity in what he's done. So I don't think he's going to deviate from that at all.
I also think that with 74% of Republicans supporting the governor right now, that the lieutenant governor is not going to have a problem succeeding the governor on that particular issue as the Republican nominee.
I think, okay, well, and now I don't know which side you're arguing, but
Me neither.
Again, I don't put that approval number as approval of all the policies here. I think that's
I totally understand that. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. Look, when the
lieutenant governor is going to have his own problems with the Republican base based on the fact he was Hogan's running mate, and that you're going to get the hardcore 25% Trumpists who hate all things Hogan are going to label Rutherford with that label no matter what, whether or not. And I would argue that the lieutenant governor is more conservative mostly than the governor, quite frankly.
I'd love to hear that argument be made, but I think we're talking in the future now. We can save that for another time. Again,
of course.
I think there's a certain amount of fatigue that's going on, and a lot of it's going to depend on what happens between now and the election. And there's a lot that's going to go, particularly with districting, particularly with where the economy is. But if the economy is still not fully recovered, people are going to look back at these decisions that the governor's made. And if the lieutenant, I mean, look, you got the comptroller coming out and saying kudos to the governor. Okay, I mean that tells you a lot right there. I think, you know, he particularly made a point of applauding the governor for the partial reopening of restaurants for the outside dining or whatever. That seems to be staking out at least the middle. And so,
and you make a very interesting point there about the economy, because look, every Democrat who looks like they may run for governor, Francho, also Brooks, Johnny O, Calvin Ball, all those guys will have, you know, if the economy's not up, they're going to have their own economic problems in their own counties, some of which being exacerbated by saying closed longer than the state did. So they're going to have problems in their own backyard. If you think that the economy is going to tarnish the lieutenant governor, whoever the Republican nominee is, it's also going to, it's also going to be a problem for, say, Johnny O if he's the Democratic nominee, because he's got his own problems in his own economy to worry about that may or may not be fixed by that as well.
I think the difference, though, is that Democrats have a lot of room for error. The Democratic nominees have a lot of room for error. If someone wants to succeed Governor Hogan, and I don't know how we swerved into this, but we're talking about it, so let's talk about it.
I blame you.
The Hogan coalition is frayed, and it's not just Trump. Trump's part of it, but it's not. It's not just Trump. And I think the Gonzales poll shows some of that fraying, particularly with regard to this issue. I think if you look at what Republican legislators are saying, this is a part of this issue. I think, as one of our commenters points out, what's going on with the unemployment system in the state is going to be. I mean, the fact is, if you're in charge when things are bad, doesn't matter if it's fair or not, you get blamed. It's like the quarterback on the losing team. Okay, that's just
if you remember with the Obamacare website, that helped doom Anthony Brown in 2014. So that's an absolutely valid point, especially when you consider, I believe the lieutenant governor was overseeing unemployment, as far as labor goes. I don't know if that was within the governor's portfolio under COVID-19 or not.
Yeah, no, and I'm not pointing that. I'm just saying Republican keeping that coalition together is going to be hard. And there's also, let's be honest. You look back. Two-term governors in this state have not had the same party follow them since 1994.
Yes.
Okay. And that was a close race. So there's a certain amount of fatigue that sets in too. We're in uncharted territory with a Republican term. And let's remember, so the room for error is very, very small for whoever tries to succeed Governor Hogan. And if the facts on the ground of the record are net job losses at the end of the day, if there's not a big success on redistricting, if there's still this fraying over this issue going forward, I think fences are being mended. We'll see how well that gets done in the long term. It's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. And oh yeah, by the way, sitting on the other side, maybe the Democrats have learned to nominate somebody who can at least plausibly pretend to be a moderate with tens of millions of dollars waiting to go, which would be, Mount Everest to climb anyway. So,
yes,
there's just not a lot of room for error. And I think if folks in the political shop on the second floor think that this Gonzales poll shows that everything's honky dory, they need to look a little deeper in the numbers. That was the only thing I was bringing up about the whole thing.
No, that's a fair assessment too.
And there was also a question about whether the shutdowns did more harm than good, which is a crazy question in a lot of ways, because you can disagree with how far the shutdown went and not necessarily think it went. So when you get Western Maryland, where a third said it did more harm than good, that's pretty damn. That's like strongly disapprove. Okay, so that's significant. Again, if you're a Democrat, that doesn't faze you at all. If you're a Republican who's trying to win statewide, that's a pretty big red flag. So
I don't think I do want to.
I don't think the Gonzales poll is this. I think the Gonzales poll overall, people approve what the governor's doing. We're all in this together. We're supportive. The governor's going in the right direction. But if Republicans and especially Republicans who want to see someone succeed Governor Hogan think that this poll kind of shows everything's great, then you need to look a little harder. That's all I'm saying. Go ahead.
Yeah. To that point, you talked about Trump and the approval ratings for Trump.
Right.
And how often have we gotten comments in our polls that said,
right.
well, the Republicans need to have a nominated governor who is more like Trump in order to win.
Right.
Once again, the data shows that a Trump-like candidate running in Maryland would get absolutely crushed.
Right, gets about 35%, and that's been pretty consistent. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
If anybody's, I don't think there are serious people who think that we should nominate somebody who's like Trump or more Trump-like to run for governor, thinking they can win. There's a lot of unserious people who like the governor more than
a lot of them sit on central committees.
Some of them are on central committee.
Yeah, a lot of them sit on Republican central committees. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, they get elected. I mean, I know. Maybe, the party supporting the president
electing central committees. Then again, a lot of people in our central committee, when we did our central committee survey back during the 2018 election, a lot of them said they would never support they would never support somebody who was running. They support a term limit at 2 terms to run for office, and then immediately supported the person running for national committee woman for a 3rd term. But I digress.
Okay, but go back, because you're missing a key point. Again, if you want to go back to Gonzales Poll, look at the numbers. Yes, overall, the president's not doing very well. But look at his approval among Maryland Republicans. It's over 90%. Okay.
There's a difference though between somebody who supports the president and somebody who supports the president and think that the Republicans need to nominate Trump for Trump-like for governor.
I understand that, but you're saying we shouldn't elect people who are so supportive of the president. Most Republican voters.
That's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that we need to elect serious people who can understand the difference between running for president nationally and running for governor in a Democratic state like Maryland. Let me highlight our friend Jim Wass, who's the Central Committee Chairman of Prince George's County. Hardcore Trump supporter. He is a supporter of the president. He also understands how to actually win, and he understands that a Trump Republican running for governor in Maryland is not going to do well in Prince George's County and half a dozen other places do. There are serious people who support the president, who also recognize how you actually win in Maryland. And unfortunately, too many Central Committee members are of that unserious camp who think that we have to go full Trump balls to the wall. Never mind, damn the torpedoes, damn whatever issues we supported before, just Trump. So, and the numbers just don't pan out. The numbers do not reflect that at all.
But the Central Committee doesn't nominate. The Central Committee doesn't nominate our candidates. The Central Committee doesn't get anybody elected. In a lot of counties in the state, the president will do very well in certain parts, but it's not going to win statewide in a lot of competitive races. And there are a lot of people in the party who understand that difference. So you're right, but again, I don't think the problems that we have are simply a Trump phenomenon. And
no, absolutely not. No. And I think it would be political malpractice to think that they are. And I think that some people on our side think that they are, that it's 100% Trump. Trump is part of a symptom. Trump's part of a huge problem. If Trump does get reelected, that's the weird juxtaposition right now for a lot of people, is that if Trump gets reelected, a Democrat will get elected governor of Maryland in 2022. That I'll take that to the bank. But
I don't know if that. It may or may not. The point is that one of the things we saw in the Gonzales Poll is what we've seen all along, that the president is not very popular. The governor is. There's a case to be made that there's a Hogan coalition, kind of a more moderate Republicanism that can be successful winning statewide. If you want to, you got to get out of your Trump bubble and understand that and look at the numbers. That's reinforced.
I agree. Why don't we take a break? When we come back, we will preview the election on Tuesday. Does that sound good? Sounds good. Let's stick with us. You're listening to Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network.
My name is Rob Seifert, and I am running for the Republican nomination with Congress, seeking to represent the 3rd Congressional District here in Maryland. I'm running as a Republican because I believe in the Republican Party platform, but my goal is to be your man in Washington. I want to be there to serve your interests, not DC insiders. My goal is to empower you to take charge of your own lives and make your own destiny, not to empower the bigger government. My name is Rob Seifert, and I approve this message.
Zwoele zomerhits.
Klopvaste actua.
De leukste cadeaus. Donna.
The sound of summer.
Radio Donna.
We are back. Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network. I am Brian. He is Greg.
Good to be here.
It is good to be here, Greg. The election concludes. What?
It's great to be here with the delay.
Oh, there's irony for you. I'm playing into the delay, and I don't even know what's happening. Greg, the primary concludes on Tuesday. I think that's the best way to describe the election, that it concludes on Tuesday. Yeah. We obviously have a presidential election, presidential primaries here. I don't think that there's any drama as to what's going to happen there in any of those races, nor with the election of delegates from either party. I think it's very clear that the presidential delegates for Biden and Trump, respectively, will win. The rest of the drama, and I use that term very loosely, comes from the congressional races and other local elections like judge and school board. We don't have a U.S. Senate race this year. We don't have state and local races except for Cecil County. Let's start there. Cecil County executive race. The only county level races that are really this year are in Cecil County. A very hotly contested primary.
Hold on. You're talking about drama on the Republican side?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You didn't say, because you ignored the city of Baltimore, which is going to be the most dramatic elections. But
we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get to Baltimore.
All right. I just want people know we know there's Baltimore.
I'm aware. Some people don't realize that.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, shut up.
Oh man, I'll do this one more time, and that's it.
And that's it. You're out of here. I think it's very clear it's a two-person race between the incumbent Alan McCarthy and Danielle Hornberger. It seems like the smart money is on Hornberger. We, of course, ran a story on McCarthy a couple weeks ago talking about his connections to Democratic-controlled PACs and what's going on up there. Greg, you know people in Cecil County. You've seen what's going on social media and in the news. What's your take?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, we interviewed Danielle Hornberger. She's one of those big Trump people that you have a problem with. But she's likely going to win.
I didn't say I had a problem with all Trump people. There's a difference.
I didn't say you had. I didn't say you said that. What I said was she's one of those big Trump people you have a problem with.
I don't have a problem with Danielle Hornberger.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm glad we cleared that up.
Let me burn my own bridges, man. Come on.
Yeah, you're right. You certainly don't need any help from me.
No.
So, okay. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of infighting in Cecil County. It'll depend on who shows up. And, I did not cut Brian off. We lost him from the finger legs. So let's make this point. We'll see what happens with that. I think a lot of this infighting in Cecil County is very much inside politics. People come out, and it'll still come down to basic who do people know and that kind of stuff. So on the Republican side, I don't know if we're going to get Brian back or not. I did not hang up on him, just for the record. This is our second to last show, and you probably sense some tension there, but I did not hang up on him. Okay, he's the internet is not being our friend tonight. We generally love technology.
Yes, I love technology.
And I don't know if he can hear me or not, but I'm going to plow forward. So we have these congressional races. I don't think many of them are going to be consequential. By the way, go to redmaryland.com, click on our 2020 election tab. We've got great information on candidates and races throughout the state, including lots of interviews with these Republican congressional candidates. District 1, we've interviewed Jorge Delgado, and we've had Congressman Harris on a number of times. He's spoken at both of our Red Maryland conferences, leadership conferences. I think, of course, he'll win rather easily. The only one that's, I mean, there's some competitive ones, and if Brian comes back, he can talk about those. The only other race that presumably may be competitive come November would be the 6th Congressional District, where we have endorsed Neil Parrott, who I think will win in the primary. There's other good candidates, and we have information about them as well at redmaryland.com. But I'd encourage you to support Delegate Parrott and read our endorsement of Delegate Parrott that we had there. You know, in a year where Republicans could do well and had chances to pick up, the 6th Congressional District is one where there'd be a lot more attention. I think a guy like Neil Parrott is the kind of is one type of very good candidate that we can get to run for Congress. But with the gerrymandered districts we have, it's going to be very, very tough. And an election year where Democrats are motivated to turn out, even if Republicans are really motivated to turn out as well, in Maryland, that's a win for the Democrats, as we saw in 2018, and what we've seen, frankly, in a lot of presidential election years. So it's going to be a tough slog. And so we have some other competitive races. There's a real competitive race on the Republican primary side. I'm curious to win in Congressional 5 to run against Steny Hoyer. We've interviewed a number of those folks as well. Go back and listen to those. I think that's one that you'll definitely want to check out. Some of them are not so interesting or competitive, and I'm not going to throw a lot of shade. But Brian, you're back.
I will. Yeah, my in-laws Wi-Fi took a dump, so I am now hotspotting on my cell phone.
Keep it
so that's exciting.
This kind of classy rhetoric is what you're going to get at the duckpen.com going forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, hang on tight. Go ahead. Go ahead. Throw your shade.
I know you talked about the 1st district. I heard most of that. You talked about the first congressional district. I think Jorge Delgado would be a good candidate under other circumstances in a different race. I mean, he's just decided to run for Congress, and he's going to be the latest Republican to not defeat Andy Harris in a primary. For some reason, the congressman gets challenged every year by somebody. I'm not entirely sure why. Everybody wants to be a congressman, I guess. Neil Parrott's going to win in District 6. You're absolutely right there. He's our best hope to defeat David Trone. Still going to be a tough slog, particularly with Trump on the ballot. Obviously, having Trump on the ballot is going to help turn out in the western part of the district. The Montgomery County part of the district is where things go a little sideways, and things will go from there. Have you talked about the 2nd Congressional District? I didn't catch that part.
Not specifically. No, go ahead.
Yeah, the 2nd Congressional.
Right.
Yeah, the 2nd Congressional District has a lot of Republicans running in it. It's got 2 elected officials. It's got Senator Johnny Ray Salling, and it's got Delegate Rick Impalaria. You can go to redmaryland.com to read about both. Salling voted for Kerwin. Impalaria has a whole litany of issues that have come up regarding him over the years, whether it's his drunk driving incident, whether it's his attack of Republicans, whether it's his trying to meddle in the Central Committee, whether it's his voting to raise your power rates, all sorts of stuff. Impalaria is there. Tim Fazenbaker's running. I know he's taking the day off from campaigning on Monday to go to OAN. He's another guy. Nice guy. Tim Fazenbaker's a nice guy. Another guy who seems like he's auditioning for a TV gig and not actually running for Congress. Genevieve Morris is running, a couple other perennial candidates, and Scott Collier's running, speaking of TV stars. That the winner of that primary is probably going to be Johnny Ray Salling. I don't think it's going to make a hell of a lot of difference in the general election. In all due respect, that district has been gerrymandered since Bob Ehrlich held it. Again, a Trump turnout will help in parts of that district. That's a lot of blue-collar Democrats still living in that district. I don't think it's going to matter a whole hell of a lot come November. As Greg pointed out,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, as Greg pointed out, most of the rest of the congressional districts are particularly not competitive. The 7th district is just a mess as far as the Republican primary goes. I wrote about Kim Klacik and her absolutely knucklehead comment that she made last week, wondering if it was legal for the Baltimore Sun to endorse a candidate in an election, whether it was legal. I mean, I really was serious when I said I hope that being her, she's just playing stupid and she's not really this stupid. I can't imagine somebody is that stupid and running for Congress. But I've seen crazier things too. I've seen Ray Bly run for Congress a bunch of times. So, all bets are off. The 5th district has a lot of candidates who can be solid. Obviously Rob Seifert is our sponsor tonight. There's Chris Palombi's been on the show. Lee Havis is a friend. So we have a lot of candidates there. But let's face it, Steny Hoyer is going to get reelected. In our district, District 4, where Greg and I live, Anthony Brown's going to get reelected. John Sarbanes is going to get reelected in 3. It's just God's honest truth. Okay. Somebody asked me, somebody messaged me, and he said, it's the 8th congressional district. What do you think is going to happen? Who's the best Republican? I don't know, but I was able to send them to our primary election coverage and our candidate surveys, which is one of the reasons why we have done those over the years.
That's right.
I don't know if you have anything else to add about the congressional.
I think there's some good candidates. I think when you look in the 2nd congressional district, we should. Genevieve Morris is in there. Am I getting the name right there?
I mentioned her.
Okay. Is someone who's a capable, intelligent, understands a lot of important policy issues. I think some of those elected officials that you mentioned in that race, it's a chance for them to get their name recognition out and do that kind of stuff. There's always the question, these races are so gerrymandered and the deck is stacked against these guys, men and women who are running for Congress. Is there any benefit in running and being the nominee and doing something? Well, you can make an argument that there are some benefits. You can make an argument that toppling any incumbent is not a one cycle project. But it's hard for people to run for Congress time after time. And I think when you look at, the folks who have been recruited, I think a couple of these races you have, as Brian pointed out, you have some good candidates. I think Neil Parrott, as I mentioned before, is a really, really good candidate, not just because he's an elected official, but because he's bright and articulate and hardworking and understands the community and understands the issues. And I think guys like Johnny Ray Sallin can do some of those same things as well. Some of these other kids, but you also get people in there who, don't have any name recognition, who aren't raising a lot of money. I know you've made Kim Klacik a project of yours, but the reason she's been the nominee and probably will again is because at least she's out there getting people know her name more than the others. I hear some of the other candidates.
It's a name ID race. Yeah.
But that's important. I mean, you can't, that's the first threshold.
What's important in the primary. Yeah. But
okay, but they're not going to vote for you. And she's been competitive fundraising. If you look at some of the reports with her opponent, it's again, you're tilling at windmills with a lot of this stuff. But you don't see a lot of these congressional races where they raise 6 figures, and she's at least done that. I'm not trying to defend her necessarily. I'm just saying, if you're doing something that people know who you are, that's the important first step to ever get elected to somebody for Congress. If you're able to raise money and get your name out there one way or another, that's how people get elected to Congress. And the deck is stacked against them. So there are some candidates that are better than others. And sometimes that takes a longer term project. And there aren't a lot of people, I know we've had our criticism of Dan Bongino, but one of the things Dan did was he ran multiple times. He ran wherever there was a race, didn't have to live in the district. I think we've learned that people don't really care that much about that kind of stuff. But he was able to build a name record. He was able to build a donor base and a volunteer base. And so
but that was the thing. He actually ran a serious campaign. He had the volunteers. He had the donors. He had a plan. And I'm not sure any of these people have a plan.
Well, I think so. I think Neil Parrott does, and of course
I'm not talking about six is a competitive district. Okay,
people. I mean, I'm making
a
general.
I'm talking about in the non-competitive races.
I don't think any of them are really competitive. That's the point that I'm making. I'm not even sure that the 6 is ostensibly the most competitive, but I don't know that it's that competitive either. Long story short, if you want to have good, if you want to have good candidates, we have to do a better job of supporting them. If you want to be a serious candidate, you're gonna have to work at it. If we're ever going to make it a serious effort, and short of some redistricting reform, frankly, the state parties never made it much of a priority. And so you get the candidates that you get, frankly. If we're not going to commit as a party to supporting a candidate to beat these people, and we're just waiting for somebody to jump in the pool and swim by themselves, really good candidates aren't going to waste their time doing that. And the people
who talk about this extensively when it comes to running for like attorney general or for some of these statewide races.
It's the same thing. And I know people get frustrated. Oh, why isn't the state party promoting these people? It's a strategic decision that they're going to put the race up. Now, let's talk about some other races on the Republican, we'll get to the city of Baltimore. I guess we'll end with that. But
yeah,
because I think that's the one that's going to be the most interesting coming out of next week. We do have a number, not just here in Anne Arundel County, but a number of competitive judicial races.
Yes.
So let's talk, because those are significant as well. Now, the way that those work is that you can win either Republican or Democratic ballot and then make it to the fall. So what the incumbent judges like to do is be the top, however many there are on the ballot, 2, 3, 4, whatever, 5, whatever it is, on the ballot, both Republican and Democrat, and then they sail to November. That's what they try to do. And then for challengers, all they got to do is get through, maybe just on the Democratic ballot, maybe just on the Republican ballot, and then they're on in the fall. And it might be, 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 7 or something, or 2 out of 3 or whatever it is. So I'm curious to get your thoughts, particularly on the one here in Anne Arundel County. I've always been supportive of competitive judicial races. I know the bar isn't.
Yes.
But I've always been supportive of that. And I think we have some interesting competitive races for judge.
I think that I think it's always interesting because it's interesting because you always kind of see both parties kind of coalesce around the sitting judges, no matter who nominated them. It's been very rare where we've seen it's been very rare where we have seen one party or the elected officials of one party back a challenger judge. I mean, we've seen it before. We saw it here in Anne Arundel County in 2004 with Judges Getsky and Harris. We saw that in, I believe it was 2012 when Judge Asti was elected. I can tell you, I've never been a fan of the judges' slates. I've never been a fan of the idea that the judges are basically immune from dealing with addressing the issues. They've always had to, kind of pit-putt around actual issues, which is an advantage to them and a disadvantage to them because the challenger, in Anne Arundel County case, Wes Adams, can talk about these things and the judges cannot, which again is an advantage and a curse to them as well. I know for a fact that the 4 judges that were appointed, at least one better qualified judge was not appointed. I know for a fact his initials are GMK. That's disappointing and kind of leads me to choose to vote for Wes Adams and single shoot Wes Adams. But I agree, competitive elections are better. You should notice that every time that the issue of the election for judges comes up, that the establishment types, the media always laments the election of judges. And that should clue you in on why a competitive judicial election is important.
Yeah. And now I'm going to maybe say some things that are controversial, though I don't necessarily think they are. The judicial selection process that we have is it is touted as being this almost objective, non-political evaluation by really smart experts on who is qualified to be a judge. I've been through that process. I know a lot of people who've been through that process. I know people who've made lists and have been nominated and are on the bench, and people haven't. The folks who sit on the nominating commission, they're political appointees. Okay. They're not necessarily political hacks. And some of them, frankly, here in Anne Arundel County are big Democrats. You want to know why I'm doing this right now and not running for election as judge? It's a big part of the reason why. But there are always lots of people who apply. I think everybody who applied is qualified. The reason that the organized bar likes to keep that process to themselves is because they control it. Okay. You know, the one of the 3 women's bar associations have great input into who gets selected as a judge, much more than you do as a voter if you don't have competitive elections. Now, it's interesting in this race particularly. Look, I think all the judges that were appointed are qualified. Okay. I think there were other qualified people who went through that process as well. Okay. It is subjective. And in fact, as someone who's gone through the process, you're never told why someone was selected and someone wasn't. There's no objective criteria. It's completely subjective, very secretive. And you don't know why one person gets chosen and it's another. And if you don't think there's a lot of politics involved, you're being naive.
Sadly mistaken.
It is absolutely a political process, which if you're the president of a local bar, okay, if you're president of a local bar association, or you're on the MSBA panel that has evolved in judicial selection, you want to have that control. Okay. You want to be doing that. If you are on that nominating commission, a lot of whom appear in front of these judges later on, which is not a coincidence. You want to be in control of that process, and you want to support the people who've gone through that process and have won, and you'll be very unified in that. And, I think Wes Adams is every bit as qualified to be a judge as the people who are sitting on the bench, which is not to denigrate them in any way, some of whom were his deputies at one point in time. So I don't know that qualification really is the issue. And I understand that the judges are limited by ethical considerations to talk about specific cases or whatever. You're right. They use that as a shield and a sword. Okay. Right, wrong, or indifferent. The bar hates they hate popular elections of judges because they want to control the process and they don't want the public to do it. They hate them. Okay. I had conversations with people in that judicial nomination committee that called Allison Asti selfish for running and getting elected. Okay. There are a lot of lawyers who won't apply to be a circuit court judge because they don't want to have to run and go out in the public and run for office. A lot of them. Okay. Which is why you have a lot more who apply for district court judgeships. It's not a question of qualification, and it's not objective that these people went through were the best. Okay, whatever that means. Because how were they the best? Maybe they were the best under varying criteria. I'm not saying that I deserve to be there more than Rob Thompson, let's say, but taking that as an example, objectively, how is he more qualified than me? And does the opinion of, the LGBT bar association as to qualification, should that matter more than your opinion as a voter who lives in the county? Under the current commission process, it does. I have to tell you. And I have no idea what they said about me, because their opinion goes to the commission, but we never hear it. Some we get, some we don't. That's just an inside thing. Okay. So that's why we have it. And that's why I think here in Anne Arundel County, we have a tradition of electing challenger vote. Now, when it's a Democrat governor, especially a Democratic governor from outside of the county, who's making very political appointees, and Glenn Denning and O'Malley were very political in their appointees. Ehrlich was very scrupulous in trying to just pick the best person. You can argue that. I think the Governor Hogan, also tries to do that, but there's no question that, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, even though it's perfectly clear that that there were a lot of boxes that had to be checked for the circuit court vacancies that were filled for the folks who are running for re-election now. Okay? This governor's been criticized for years that there weren't enough of A, B, C, and D on the bench. And it's not a surprise that the nominations and the people who were ultimately appointed checked off a lot of those boxes. It's not a coincidence. Okay? I was told point blank when I applied, a couple of those spots are saved for ABC. And if you're okay with that, fine. But again, don't tell me this is the best person gets the job. Okay? And I'm not saying I was a better person. I am not saying that. This is not bitter grapes. I would have been saying this if I'd never applied. You know that, Brian, because I've talked about this issue.
No, that's true. Yeah, you've been on this beat for forever, ever since we've been doing this.
The fact is, if I'm going to be perfectly candid, because we're going out now, the fact that I was part of Red Maryland and did this and have talked about judicial elections for years was absolutely used against me.
Oh, absolutely.
My conservative political view absolutely was used against me. The Monumental Bar Association knew all about my views on marijuana when I interviewed with them. I know that the interviewer from the Maryland State Bar Association was asking people about stuff I'd written about Red Maryland to people that I had put down as references. So I know that my open political views were used against me in a process, ostensibly. So if you think the governor, who we've been big supporters of, controls this process and is a political process, again, you're being terribly, terribly naive.
You're absolutely right.
If I really wanted to be a judge, I would have been a lot smarter. And I think you can see some examples that prove me right. If I'd kept my mouth shut, kept my head down, made the right donations to the right people along the way, I probably would have a better chance of being a judge. Not necessarily, because there's still some people who've done that and don't get it either, who are perfectly qualified. But and look, I'm not saying vote for Wes Adams or whatever. Wes Adams has his own problems. Frankly, we've been critical of him in the past as well. But don't take your ability to vote for circuit court judges for granted. And don't believe that those who, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, I don't care. Don't assume that because people went through this process that they're either more qualified or more capable of being circuit court judges than, frankly, anybody else who has applied for that job. Period. Whether they've gone through the process or not.
There you go.
So, and
there's plenty of. I'm just saying, Greg, there's plenty of time to petition your name to the general election ballot.
No, I don't.
I'm writing in Greg Klein in November.
By the way, I'm not saying that I'm not voting for the sitting judges. I just want to be clear on that.
Right.
I would say the same thing whether I voted for the sitting judges or not. I would have some serious reservation about voting for Wes Adams because of some of the things he's done and some of the people he's employed. Okay? So don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm saying don't take it for granted or assume just because the sitting judges went through this process they're the most qualified. You should make that decision on your own. Your criteria for who or what is qualified and makes a good judge is every bit as valid and as political and as subjective as the folks who sit on that nominating committee. Period. There you go.
I'm still writing in Greg Klein in November.
Well, that would be wasting your vote. That would be wasting your vote.
But I can vote my conscience, and that's what's important.
Good.
I support
judges. I welcome our new. No, I'm kidding. Most of them are going to still be judges. See, that's the thing. Now I'm joking here, but let's not lose.
No, you're not joking. This is
most of those guys are still going to be judges. So if you're a lawyer, if you're a practicing litigating lawyer, and you go against, which I am not doing now, just to be clear, just making a general point. If you go against them, you're going to end up in front of them, and I'm not saying they would do anything untoward, but you'd be a fool if you don't think judges are human beings. So if you want to understand why lawyers line up and the establishment lines up behind the sitting judges, there you go.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, probably guaranteed I'll never be a judge. But that's okay. I was never going to be any. So,
yeah, if you didn't get it now, I'm not sure it would have gotten any better for you in the future.
No.
There are school board races in Anne Arundel County. There's school board races lots of places. I know that our stories, our candidate surveys with school board candidates have gotten a lot of attention because there's so little coverage of this race. I know you're not in the school district. Our good friend Scott Schaefer is running in 6. Corinne Frank running in 3 in Anne Arundel County. Both red Maryland endorsed candidates. So please get out and vote for them. And look, school board races are important, okay? Because a lot of the candidates that are going to get endorsed by your local paper or by the PTA or whatever are the union candidates. And don't think for a second that if you're not vigilant about this, that some phony baloney union candidate is not going to get through and elected in Washington County or Garrett County or something like that, because they're running unaffiliated. So you're not going to be able to see on the ballot what their positions are. It's why we have done the work for you, or try to do the work for you at redmaryland.com.
I do a little bit. And don't take those, I know Brian and I don't, because we live here in Arizona County. We fought for an elected school board for so long, but don't take those races for granted. Those are important races. Do the work. Yeah. Encourage others to do the same as well. And believe me, those kind of races are the ones where you posting on Facebook who you're voting for will be influential, because a lot of people who will go to the polls have no idea who these races are down ballot, and things like that are helpful. That's where the social media activism really does pay off in a very overt, helpful way. So
absolutely,
much more helpful than most of the memes you're posting right now, saying, "Hey, I'm voting for so and so for board of education. If you live in Frederick County at large, or you live in this district in Anne Arundel County or wherever, you should vote for them too." That's good political activism.
Indeed. Last but not least, the Baltimore City mayoral election. Do you Republican side?
Oh, do the Republican side. Okay, go ahead.
Republican side, I think everything was summed up by the Baltimore Sun roundup about those candidates, where I realized that my 4-year-old daughter has more cash on hand than the entire Republican field for mayor, which is a sad commentary. I don't think it matters. Ultimately, obviously, I think Shannon Wright will win the primary. I think. I saw that Catalina Bird did an interview with Charles Robinson of MPT. I wonder if she hung up on him. I'm going to guess probably not. The Democratic primary, I have no idea what's going to happen there, Greg.
Here's the question.
It's so hard to figure out.
Do you think we'll have a winner declared by the time we do our last show next week? I think
yes. I say that because
I would bet the under.
You would bet the under? Okay.
Yeah,
I think that
an answer.
I think we're going to we may not have a declared winner. I think we're going to know who's going to win. But I don't think we'll have an official winner, because I think there will probably be enough ballots outstanding that we can't kind of write it off for certain. It depends. You could have a race where first place and 7th place are 600 votes apart. You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think anybody has any clue what's going to happen here. If this race were, I think that the morning line favorite would be Sheila Dixon, just based solely on name identification. I think she would be an overwhelming favorite if there was a get out the vote operation, at least a substantial one with actual physical polls.
Yeah, maybe. The other thing is, are we going to have all new heights of shenanigans going on in novel electioneering strategies, if you follow my meaning? I mean, how low in a race that's this competitive and this high stakes, with this many people involved, what won't some of these candidates do? Who, by the way, some of whom have clearly shown a propensity for corruption,
Yeah.
What won't they do? I think that's really going to be kind of interesting as well. And who controls the people who count the votes? You know, the old Stalin line, it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes. If this thing is close, is going to be, and we know that office is, you know, completely messed up under normal circumstances. So I think even if you had a clear winner, you're not going to have somebody who's going to be, forget a mandate. I think you're going to have somebody who's not going to be, what's the word?
Credible.
Legitimate. I don't think you're going to have a legitimate winner that people will acknowledge legitimately won this when it's over. I think it will.
And don't forget, you're still going to have, you know, unlike most years, there is an independent who's trying to get on the ballot who is going to apparently be sufficiently funded. So unlike most years where it's rally around the flag, you're going to have a bruised Democrat who has maybe 80% of the Democratic electorate didn't vote for them.
Right.
You know, trying to run against them. And don't underestimate the fact that there are a lot of pissed off people in Baltimore City who may not be necessarily the type of people who show up and return a ballot for a Democratic primary where there's no major race on the ballot other than mayor. I think there's enough reason to think that Miller, I think Miller's the guy's name if I remember correctly, can at least make some noise and give people a choice, which unfortunately it's very clear that the Republican nominee is not going to be able to run a credible campaign, whoever it is, to give people that voice. Yeah. 7 people running to, again, be the tallest midget in the room and probably finish in 3rd place.
Well, if you're not going to,
God love them. God love them, some people, for doing it, because, you know, we don't want, you know, it's better to have a nominee than not have a nominee. But 7 Republicans running for mayor when we have so many, we have so many central city council races where we couldn't find a Republican to run.
Yeah.
You know, come on. Greg, let's bring this ship. Oh, go ahead.
No, you're right. And look, again, if you want to be serious, you have to, you talked about having a plan and running a serious campaign. I mean, you know, you can get mad at us all you want, but this is a city of 300,000 people. How many people live in this city now?
600.
You know, hundreds of thousands of people live in the city. Tens of thousands of them will be voting come this November for a mayor. If you don't have any money, how are you going to campaign to people like that? How are you credibly going to do anything? You know, putting up some signs and going on Facebook is not a campaign.
Nope.
So I don't necessarily applaud people who just want to, you know, get a name on a ballot. I mean, your intentions don't matter. You have to understand, this is something we've harped about, and we've only got a couple more shows to harp about it. If you want to win, you have to understand the science of electoral politics. You have to understand the nuts and bolts of how people get elected, how people choose, how people cast votes, and what they do, and how you win doing that. You can be really smart and innovative and surprise and upset the conventional wisdom and do things people don't think is possible if you understand how it actually works.
Yeah.
You don't, and you just, you know, want to see your name in the paper, which unfortunately some of these candidates, that seems to be all they want to do, is post in Republican pages on Facebook and so forth. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not really doing anything. And frankly, I'm not going to waste my time talking about it anymore, Brian.
Well, you might next week, because next week, it's it. The plug gets pulled. That's it. We're done. We're out of here after next week. So next week's show, let's preview next week's show. Okay. It'll be about 2 very simple things. We're going to recap the primary results.
Right.
And then we're going to do a retrospective. One might even call it a retrospectacle of the 13-year existence of Red Maryland as where we've been, both as as an organization, as the conservative movement, and what legacy we leave behind, and kind of where things might go in the future. So that's it next week. It'll be 2 hours, probably 10 minutes of election recap, and an hour and 50 minutes of Planet Us.
Okay.
I mean, you kind of knew that.
Yeah. I mean,
Don't sound so enthusiastic.
I don't know what else we can say that we have. I mean, we'll fill the time, but I guess if we're going to do one last show, it's inevitable that's what it would be. I mean, the results aren't going to be, assuming we have complete results to share.
That's true.
I think this preview kind of shows there a lot of them. I shouldn't say that. We'll cover it.
I don't know where you are going with
give
that.
them the attention that they deserve, and then we will bid farewell and in our own way. And if you enjoyed what we've done over the last 13 years, then hopefully you'll come in and listen. And if you don't, then you're probably not listening anyway. If you want to, if you just want to hate us as we're going out,
there are plenty of people who hate watch us over the years. That wouldn't be a surprise.
That's fine.
I will promise next week I will be in my regular setup and we'll have a reliable internet connection.
That's right.
Good. So that you can look forward to that. Thank everybody for watching redmaryland.com. You only got 7 more days to look for new articles on redmaryland.com. So be sure to look at that. Check out my piece about Calvin Ball's band. Mark Unker's got a great piece about the pension. So we've got that you got that over there at redmaryland.com. Please share this with your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, co-workers, co-religious, in-laws, and outlaws. Please share with them our primary election coverage, all of our candidate surveys, all of our news stories, all of our interviews with related to the primary election.
If anybody ever asks you, who should I vote for? We've done as much work as we possibly can do to put that information together. redmaryland.com, click on the 2020 tab, share that, let people know. Okay. Because there are a lot of people who are going to walk into a polling place and they may know this or that or the other, but they're not going to know some of those races down ballot. And this is why we've stayed open as long as we have. This is one of the most important things that we do. You all have told us that. So please, 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 this is the last time I'll beg you to do anything. Share that stuff. Let people know.
Indeed. Facebook.com/Red Maryland, Twitter @Red Maryland. We're still getting people following us on Twitter, which is fascinating. But
we close too until we shut those down. But
yeah. So
we
are continuing.
There's a trove of almost 2,000 podcasts that you can listen to. This is the first time you're listening to us. There's a catalog.
That's true. Greg, any final thoughts for today?
Have a safe trip back. Number one,
Thank you.
Enjoy your time away. Everybody be safe and vote. If you haven't, vote if you want to. I'm not necessarily somebody who says you have to vote. But if you do vote, do yourself a favor, get informed, make sure you know you're voting for whoever it is. And a good way to do that, redmaryland.com, click the 2020 election tab. Thank you.
And if you do want to share any final thoughts as we bring this in for final approach next week, redmaryland@gmail.com, or you can call or text a message 410-205-4875 to the Red Maryland Talkback number. And like I said, we are 7 days away from landing this plane for the last time, for pulling this into port. So decommissioning the ship, if you will. Riding off into the sunset, whatever cliche you want.
Insert cliche here. Yes.
So for everybody here, thank you very much for listening and watching. For Greg Klein, I am Brian Griffiths. You have been listening to Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network.
Oh, radio.